When Leonardo da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa, he refused to color inside the lines. Rather, he blurred them, literally, through Sfumato, letting light and shadow blend into one another. Metaphorically speaking, he shattered the self-imposed boundaries artists of his era lived within, breaking a binary world of rigid black and white. What he revealed in that blur, though, is far more than just pure artistic technique. It is something deeply human. That we are more alive and more connected to one another when we resist being reduced down to simple categories. And I didn't understand the power of this idea until I realized that I was living it myself. And living in the blur, I've come to see it everywhere. Not just in art, but in the neighborhoods, in the streets, in the quiet daily choices people make every day about who they are and who they're willing to become. I like the Canadian society. I liked it because it is like the Mona Lisa. Layered, blurred, alive. Many people, myself included, are crossing the boundaries every single day, accepting the gray. As a first-generation immigrant, and many other immigrants in this country, I belong in two worlds. The world that I came from, and the world that I was welcomed into. Yet, that also means I may never fully belong either. I thought this feeling was exclusive to us immigrants or international students. But what surprised me the most is that this gray isn't just mine. Canadians who lived here for generations experienced it too, as the country transformed culturally, politically, and linguistically. A local Canadian growing up in North York, Markham, might have grown up enjoying classic Canadian food. But now, they happily line up for biryani, butter chicken, noodles, or pho, not because they were told to be multicultural, but because their neighborhood changed, and they changed with it. Imagine someone heading to Ridgeway Plaza, Mississauga. They walk in, they sit down, they order a delicious meal, happily embracing the spectrum of choices, accepting the meal exactly as it is, without forcing their own expectations onto it. And that act of adjusting our expectations, that is accepting the gray. That is the in-between. That is what this country is doing, imperfectly but genuinely, every single day. And that spirit goes beyond Canada. Consider the newly elected mayor of New York City, Zohan Mandani. Son of immigrants, Muslim, South Asian. Not long ago, a background like his would have easily become a barrier to political entry in one of the world's most prominent cities like New York. But now, voters look past every single category someone might have used to dissent him, and they gave him their voice. Not in spite of who he is, but with full acknowledgement of it. And this is what happens when society chooses complexity over category, when people realize that one's layer identity is not their disqualification, but simply part of who they are. And we can see this understanding elsewhere. Think about Jensen Huang, also son of immigrants, who came to North America as a teenager and went on to build NVIDIA into one of the world's most powerful and valuable semiconductor companies on the planet, reshaping the entire field of artificial intelligence. What he built doesn't fit in a single category. Not purely hardware, not purely software. Not American, not Chinese. It was a wonderful concoction of every single thing put together, and the world said yes to it. This is what it looks like when society chooses complexity in real life. Not a slogan, but a company worth more than most countries' GDPs. And just a side note here, just yesterday, on May 13th, NVIDIA's market capitalization surpassed $5 trillion. That means it has already surpassed the GDP of Germany, the world's third largest economy. And that is amazing. Back on track. Now, let's talk about how refusing to accept that complexity has actually hurt people. Because it has, and for an uncountable number of times. For most of recorded history, and well into the lifetime of many people in this room, women were sorted into two boxes. They were labeled either good or bad, virtuous or promiscuous, with little room to breathe. The good woman? Quiet, domesticated, selfless, uncomplicated. The bad woman? Everything else. Ambitious? Bad box. Outspoken? Bad box. Wanted something outside of family? Bad box. Potentially with a scarlet letter attached. This portrayal reduced more than half the world's population to a sorting exercise. And the sorted woman, the real, alive, contradictory, and complicated people have to spend an enormous amount of energy pretending to be someone much less than who they are. But are we? You and me sitting here today, speaking our minds, living full lives, might have been scoffed back at the early 2000s. And the early 2000s isn't ancient history. It's the era of smartphones in your pockets where it began to be invented. It's the music on your playlist. It's the films you grew up watching. For your information, Finding Nemo came out in 2003. Inequality of women was never a distant Sepia-turn past. It was last Tuesday. And change came. Change eventually came. We had waited for this for so long. Women stopped asking for permission to be complex. It came through culture, through conversation, and through collective refusal. One of the most prominent expressions of this shift was the He for She campaign, which didn't just ask men to support women. It asked the world to retire the binary system entirely. To view gender not as two fixed poles, but as a conversation. And storytelling content. Think about Wednesday Addams. She is dark, blunt, emotionally detached, and driven. And yet, she's one of the most beloved characters in the past decade. Not despite of her stop being a good girl, but because of it. She stopped shrinking herself into the neat two boxes of virtuous and villainous and started feeling like an actual person. And that matters, because when millions of young women across the world sees a character like this being celebrated, rather than being punished over her complexity, something shifts. They stopped shrinking themselves into two boxes and started living full lives. We do not and should not belong in a black and white frame. Women do not and should not belong in a black and white frame. What women have fought for, or continue to fight for, is not the permission to be one thing or another. It is the freedom to be both and more. Autonomy is not radicalism. It is the most basic acknowledgement that any single person contains much more than what a category can hold. But not everyone wants that acknowledgement to exist. Some systems, in fact, depend on people seeing into two boxes to maintain better control. authoritative regimes have long known how dangerous complexity is. Because the moment society sees nuance, multiple perspectives, or alternative explanations, people started asking questions. And what do we all know about asking questions? They are destabilizing. So, they eliminate the gray. They give people two options and tell them that there are no other. Loyal or traitor? Traditional or current? Us or them? Free speech is one of the clearest battlegrounds of this thinking today. On one extreme, any limit is censorship. On the other, harmful speech must be silenced. The two sides are so fixated on their own positions that they've stopped noticing the middle ground. But consider this. Galileo was put under house arrest for saying the earth moved around the sun. Now, we teach it to 8-year-olds. Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail was written in response to fellow clergymen, calling him to be less disruptive and to slow down. That letter is now studied in schools across the world. Yesterday's dangerous ideas has a bad habit of becoming today's common sense. We can defend the right to speak about these ideas fully, while acknowledging that harmful speeches can dehumanize, radicalize, or traumatize. These two things are both true. And now, let's extend that thinking to humans for a bit. Immigrants, women, minority, young. These words point at something tangible, but they don't contain you. You are the thing that overflows these categories. And that overflow, that accessible self that doesn't belong inside any box, is not your problem to manage. It's your most interesting feature. And even if the above words don't describe you, we sitting here today, we share the common identity of being a human. Can we be reduced down to any box? Can you, whatever box someone might have put you in, be described by any extreme? No, we cannot. Because the gray isn't just a political or philosophical stance. It is what makes actual human connection possible. It allows a conservative grandmother and a progressive granddaughter to sit at the same dinner table and talk instead of walking away. It allows an immigrant to love the country they left and the country they now live in without fearing betrayal. It allows someone to hold faith and question it, to critique a system while still living and believing in it. A woman can be ambitious in her career while still crave deep down for family and connection. A society can embrace diversity while still working to preserve shared values. These two things are both true. Live in the blur. Enjoy the Sfumato. Because in that rich and layered space, we become fully, complicatedly, and beautifully human. I didn't start my speech with a question, but I do want to end with one. Think about this. When was the last time you reduced someone else to a single category? A label? An assumption? A box you might have put them in before they had the opportunity to show you otherwise? Then ask yourself, what did you miss? What richness, what contradictory, what shared humanity did that box prevent you from seeing? The Mona Lisa had been studied for over 500 years. And we're still not exactly sure what she's feeling. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the most profound things, human included, are not meant to be figured out completely. They're meant to be sat with, looked closely at, and appreciated for every single thing that doesn't quite resolve.